You guys asked for it, so here it is. The newly released Baja Rey 2.0 versus the long-standing king of desert trucks, the Traxxas Unlimited Desert Racer. These are both high-end 4x4 trucks that have a lot in common but do differ in many ways, including their size, weight, performance, and especially their cost. Is there one clear-cut winner? Let's find out. Let's start this with some basic facts. These are both ready-to-run desert truck replicas. They both come with waterproof brushless electronics, and they both feature desert truck chassis designs, meaning there's a double wishbone front independent suspension and a rear solid axle trailing arm suspension. In most ways, these two trucks are more similar than they are different, but we've broken down this comparison into these 7 categories, and from now on, I'll be referring to the Baja Rey 2.0 as the BR2 and the Unlimited Desert Racer as the UDR. Now you'd think these two trucks would have a massive size difference because of their scales, but they really don't. The length difference is only about 2.4 inches and the wheelbase and width difference is less than 2 inches. The biggest difference about these trucks is their weight, with the UDR being almost 5 pounds heavier than the BR2, which doesn't sound like much until you lug one of these things a couple of miles down a trail. Both trucks have different body options and a plethora of officially licensed parts like the tires and wheels. Although technically, the different UDR trucks have the same body with different liveries. While the BR2 is offered in the Raptor body and the F100, and that F100 is the only body style of all the trucks that features a hard molded plastic grille for a little extra scale detail, realism, and some uniqueness. All the trucks and all the body styles have this in common. They all include LED lighting. Our UDR truck is a first-gen truck before they came with lights, so there's no LEDs on ours. All the body styles and all the trucks are also made from Lexan and then screwed to a plastic cage. The UDR body is one piece and it's extremely secure to that cage with little to no flapping or flexing when you're driving it around, and it looks extremely real. The BR2 body, on the other hand, is made of multiple panels, which are not sold separately and only in a set, sadly, and they're also extremely well secured, except for at the front of the hood on our F100. I can't speak for the Raptor, but this area does flap and bounce around a little, detracting from the realism. All body styles also feature interiors, driver figures, 2 functional spare tires, fire extinguishers, tire jacks, and other scale details. In this respect, they both look really great to me. Something unique on the UDR though is the functional spare drive shaft, which we've had to install and use out in the field, and it saved our butts. One more thing on the UDR body that adds to the realism that the BR2 doesn't have is the exposed live sway bar that's visible poking through the rear end of the truck as the suspension moves. After driving both trucks back to back, it's pretty clear the UDR has more bottom end torque and sounds like it too, and then tacks out faster on the top end. The BR2, on the other hand, delivers its power more smoothly, it sounds smoother, and it drives smoother, and then ramps up for more high-end top speed. With the UDR having more aggressive low-end torque, it should be expected to have a slower top speed, and it does, topping out at 46 miles an hour on that stock gearing. The BR2, on the other hand, offers more up top and goes a little faster, achieving 51 miles an hour on the stock gearing. The things like power delivery and top speed can be adjusted pretty easily when you change a pinion gear or adjust the punch settings on the speed controller, so I think these things should be taken with a grain of salt. Like previously mentioned, both trucks feature desert truck style suspension. They both feature 2 long travel shocks per corner for 8 total on the chassis, with half featuring springs and adjustable ride height collars and the other half naked. The GTR shocks on the UDR are bigger than those on the BR2, as expected since the UDR is bigger scale and nearly double the weight, with the BR2 shock size similar to a 10 scale big bore shock. In use, both suspension packages feel incredibly plush, but the UDR suspension is noticeably softer, it reacts quicker, and it uses more shock travel in most cases. The UDR chassis also seems to sit lower or have a lower ride height with the shocks more compressed, so it's more of like a droop setup when the chassis is settled. In comparison, the BR2 suspension is tuned slightly heavier with slower action and slower reaction, using less of that travel for ordinary surface chop. And in some ways, the suspension feels and looks just a little numb as the truck skims on the surface compared to the UDR. I sense Losi set up the BR2 suspension to provide the best of both worlds between skimming on the surface and being able to handle jumps. The ride height on the BR2 also sits higher relative to the UDR, so it's like half sprung and you get more body roll and rocking back and forth when you brake or accelerate, and you traction roll more easily. The UDR rocks around too, but it doesn't seem as dramatic since it's so low in the suspension and it traction rolls less. Sway bars are another component to these suspensions, and the UDR features a front and rear sway bar, while the BR2 only features a rear sway bar. The UDR rear sway bar is connected to the top of the rear axle, which is more realistic, whereas the BR2 connects the sway bar to the front of the trailing arm, which is less effective and allows more flexing. Another plus for the UDR rear suspension are the suspension limiter straps that connect the rear axle to the cage during a full droop drop, saving the shocks for damage, and they look really great. Let's just start by saying both of these trucks are a blast to drive, but there are some big performance differences. First, the locked axle. The UDR comes with a locked rear axle, and the BR2 uses an oil-filled differential. And that differential generates more traction than a locked diff, meaning the BR2 doesn't like to slide around on high traction surfaces. So if you're driving it in the street, there's a good chance the BR2 is going to be traction rolling quite a bit on you, where the UDR probably won't. On low traction surfaces like dirt, both trucks slide around no problem. The lock diff in the UDR also feels like the rear of the truck is being led around by the front end, and if you aren't using a little TSM, the truck will spin out on you pretty easily. The BR2, on the other hand, is a bit more balanced in this regard, front to rear, and it's easier to drive without using AVC stability. Second is the torque twist. This is a big one because the BR2 has tons of torque twist under power. And you might have noticed it driving on 3 wheels during the speed run, because when you accelerate and there's enough traction, that front left tire is lifting up. Now this is realistic to an extent as seen on real stadium truck racing, but if there's enough traction, it can make cornering to the left better than cornering to the right while on power. And it also has the effect of pulling or yanking the steering to the left, which you might have to counter steer for a little. If the truck had a front sway bar, it would help lower the torque twist, but out of the box, it grips, rips, and twists. Now with the UDR, torque twist is not an issue. With that locked rear axle, full sway bar support, and harder compound tires, there's little to no flex out of the UDR chassis. Generating traction is a big difference between these two trucks, and the BR2 just does it better, where the UDR tends to have a whole lot more just tire spin. You could of course just lock up that rear diff in the BR2 to try it out, or try to mimic the effects of the UDR by adding some plugs or just heavier diff fluid. Third is the ride height. Like previously mentioned, the UDR just sits lower and it settles lower in its suspension than the BR2, giving you the feeling of driving it in the terrain, as if the vehicle had sunk and settled within the dirt. On the flip side, the BR2, sitting and settling just a little bit higher, has the slight feeling of driving on the dirt, as if skimming over the surface rather than swimming through it. I think this is also in part of the shock package just being heavier on the BR2, not allowing the truck to sink into the surface like the UDR does. And this is another thing that's very tunable, and it's also pretty dang subtle. Had we not driven both of these trucks back to back, we would have never noticed it. Ultimately, both of these trucks deliver outstanding performance, but they're slightly tuned for different applications. For strictly desert truck driving, the best experience money can buy is without a doubt the UDR. It slides around aggressively, its suspension absorbs the surface chop like no other, and it is best at what it's made to do, which is real desert truck driving, which also means the suspension is not tuned for big jumps. On the other hand, the BR2 is the better overall basher, with a more balanced suspension package tuned for surface chop and hitting jumps. The BR2 platform generates a lot of traction, and the platform is smaller and much lighter, so it needs less space to be stored and worked on, and it's way lighter to carry. Not to mention, it's cheaper. Now at the time we filmed this, the Baja Rey 2.0 is about $530, and it requires only one battery pack, which gets you out of the door for about $600. The UDR, on the other hand, costs about $700 and then requires 2 LiPo batteries, which can set you back about $800 to $900, which just maybe is totally worth it. Guys, I'm Brett from AMain Hobbies. Go check out the Losi Baja Rey 2.0 and the Traxxas UDR by following our links down below. And if you want more RC videos, go check these out.